so much. And thank you for inviting us to participate in this conversation. I want to appreciate NASAA's interest in this and your hosting for this. I'm going to share my slides and let me do that real quick. Trying to figure out the quickest way to do this. All right, so hopefully this works. So thanks again. This is such an important topic, and I so appreciate the interest in this, in investing in disability through funding and accessible and equitable grant making. I've been wanting to do this deeper dive into this topic because, you know, we are a collection of major funders of the arts in this country, and people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the US. And it's really important to ensure that their work is being funded and that audience accessibility is being funded. I've been working with NEA staff to assess and improve our grant making, to draw more disability-focused grant applications and ensure that our application process is accessible and equitable. And when we talk about support for disability, we're coming at it from different angles. And I know that everyone in the room has a different approach, and you have different requirements and needs within your state. So I encourage you to think about this from whatever direction, whatever angle you are able to approach this. But I'm excited to hear different approaches that people are taking. So this can be dedicated funding for accessibility, dedicated funding for disabled artists and arts programs that serve people with disabilities. And then if you cannot create a dedicated funding stream, there are other opportunities such as support for ensuring that support for disability engaged projects are in your regular grant guidelines. And then finally, also ensuring that your grants process is accessible and equitable. And so we will do a deep dive into that. And I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Hayward, who's going to provide some background. And before I do, I just want to give a quick visual description. I'm a middle-aged white woman with shoulder-length brown hair and bangs, wearing a black and white print top, and I have a blurred background. So I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Thanks, Beth. This is Catherine Hayward. I am the accessibility specialist working with Beth in the Office of Accessibility at the NEA. Before I dive in on some data, I'll give a brief description. I am a white woman with messy, curly hair tied back in a ponytail. I have a small nose stud, and I'm wearing a royal blue V-neck elbow sleeve sweater dress with a sort of green wall and green plant backdrop. So because I like data, and I think it's important just to understand how big the numbers are getting, I wanted to provide a little bit of background about disability in the United States. The numbers continue to increase, and right now it's at about 27% of adults in the United States are living with disabilities, and that's just the 18 and older. And that is 1 in 4. So I don't know what our total is right now, but if you think about that being 1 in 4, there's a likelihood we have a pretty good representation in our Zoom room today. And as we know, the likelihood of having a disability increases as we age. 44% of adults 65 and over have a disability. And the disability community is the largest minority group in the United States, and one that you can join at any time, no matter who you are. But data is not the only reason, nor does it tell the whole picture of the importance of including people with disabilities in your grant making. Disability is an asset to organizations. Being intentional about accessibility helps maintain audiences as they grow older, and it grows audiences from a community that you probably don't even know that you're missing. Um, there's also so much exciting work happening in disability arts, such as integrated dance companies, and I'll show an image in a moment. Disability also intersects with other ways you may be working to attract audiences. If you have programs or have an interest in low-income families, the aging population, BIPOC communities, LGBTQIA plus communities. Disability is overrepresented in many of other marginalized groups. And disability and accessibility are two big letters of the DEIA efforts and ones that span across all of the work that you do. And I'm going to read a quote from Alice Shepard, a dancer and choreographer for Kinetic Light. She says, when disabled artists and disability artistry are not centered, supported, and welcomed as important contributors to the field misses out on the innovation, creativity, imagination, and artistry that comes from the disability community. Audiences and artists should know our work. As people invested in the arts, we owe it to ourselves and to the future to engage with the work of disabled artists. And the image to the right is Alice along with fellow dancers Duran Herman and Laura Lawson from one of the more recent, but not the recent, I think, work of Kinetic Light called Wired, where dancers, including dancers in wheelchairs who were doing aerial work. So there is a lot of work to be done, although having these conversations is helping. And it also means there's a lot of opportunities for work in this area. And, we at the NEA have been gathering information, having conversations with artists and others involved in the arts and disability field for quite a while. And from speaking with disabled artists, one of the things we hear all the time is the need for support, and that comes in terms of financial support, such as funding specifically for disabled artists, as well as support for accessibility for both artists and audiences. We think a lot about how a program can be made accessible for audience members, but we also need to be looking at what would it take to draw in and bring in a disabled artist as part of the programming? And it also means that there needs to be support for professional development, arts education, and other opportunities to really build that talent pipeline that includes individuals with disabilities. And now I'll turn it to Beth.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, it's great to kind of set the stage for why this work is important. And so I'm going to dive into some of the types of funding that we see state arts agencies and regional arts organizations doing, and what you might think about, what you might be interested in doing. So there can be specific funding for disability. This can be targeted to disabled artists. Funding for accessibility. This can be mini grants under $5,000, which can actually go a long way towards supporting sign language interpretation or other small purchases to help an organization with their accessibility. Or you can have larger grants for accessibility for larger projects and purchases that can help an organization. And then capital funding. This is one of the big gaps. The NEA cannot support capital funding. A lot of states cannot, but this is an area that we really need to find who is doing this funding. And if any of the states or regions are interested in exploring this, we would love to talk with you about that. And then also just building it into your regular grant making sure that arts organizations can see these projects as options for funding in your grant making. It could be programming, just general programming for disabled audiences and artists that can include arts education, purchasing equipment such as assisted listening systems, captioning systems, or renting equipment. Other forms of program accessibility, such as sign language interpretation for events, capital improvements, of course, doing an accessibility assessment and bringing in access consultants to help you. There can be a cost with that. So this is an excellent way to help support that. And the final thing I wanted to mention is that there is an added cost to living with a disability that many people have to assume, including the cost, or including for artists who might need additional supports for their work, whether it's sign language interpreters, personal assistants, equipment that they need. So you might want to consider that if you have grants for artists, adding an additional amount to anyone who might need those access services. So if it's like a $20,000 fellowship for artists, consider adding an extra 2 or 3,000 that could help them with those extra costs so that they can have an equitable experience compared to your other artists. And so I wanted to show what we have in our guidelines under our different artistic disciplines. So under dance, we support disability-led projects or projects that meaningfully engage disabled artists and or students in pursuit of artistic and creative goals. And then for theater and musical theater, we have a guideline, a project type that's projects that advance or sustain the creative work and or careers for people with disabilities through employment, industry training, technical assistance, and organization capacity building. So those are some ways that you can build those options into your grant making. And wanted to talk a little bit about making the actual grant process, documenting it and assessing it within your grants. And I'm going to pass it over to Catherine to talk about this.
Thanks, Beth. This is Catherine again. And, I invite you to think about which of these you do and which you might be able to include. I'm going to make several offerings around how the application process itself could be made more accessible. You do want to ensure that the website and applicant portal are accessible for screen reading software in particular. And it always helps to have a user tester, someone who actually uses a screen reader, to give that feedback. Provide alternative formats for the guidelines. Be ready to do that. Provide alternative means for applying when possible. So an ability to apply in a different way other than an online portal you may be using. To provide guidelines and questions in a downloadable document to allow completion offline before submitting so that people can have all that information ready to go and not have that counted against their bandwidth and their time as they're actually using the online system. Also, allow information and materials to be saved throughout the process. So an applicant can enter data in multiple sessions if needed. Many people with various types of disabilities need to take breaks. So having that opportunity to not have to sit and do it all at one time is very useful. I think we all do this, but I mean, it always bears repeating and repeating and repeating to strongly encourage applicants to start the process well before the deadline, and also so they can let you know of any access needs that are not being met so that they can meet your deadline. And allow an applicant to verify that the correct documents were uploaded. And then one of the things to be mindful of, especially for all of you, is that recipients of federal and state funds are required to provide physical access, effective communication, and reasonable and necessary accommodations for staff and visitors with disabilities. Either through Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act or the Americans with Disabilities Act, you have these requirements. And as a state arts agency and regional arts organization, you must assess and ensure subgrantee compliance. So how is that done? There are a few different ways that we've been hearing. One is having an assurance of compliance as part of the application. which can vary from just a checkbox to some other items. Also having accessibility questions that you specifically ask in the application, or a checklist that you require them to fill out and upload. And sometimes I've seen that they're required and sometimes recommended. Another way to kind of tell is our access services budgeted for? Because that really tells you whether they've really thought it through, how to make sure they're as accessible as can be. Also, again, there are various checklists for physical accessibility of facilities as well as program accessibility. Um, I don't think it's too common, but there are some that do site visits and actually get to go and see what the spaces look like. And some state arts agencies require full assessments for operational fund recipients. Um, every 3 years is usually, for us, the Section 504 workbook must be completed every 3 years and kept on file. And I think I'm going to switch it over to Beth.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. We're running a bit behind, so I'm just going to quickly do two last slides, and I put some more information in the chat. So, in order to be fully equitable, it's important to recruit disabled grant reviewers, people who have experience with disability on your panels to provide authentic perspectives and insights into the applications, to recognize any issues that might be in the application, either positive or negative, that other panelists may not recognize. And you can you can find qualified panelists by connecting with the disability community, disabled artists who might be interested in serving on your panels, and just some examples of accommodations, because you need to make sure they have access to electronic materials. Print materials might help when people have a hard time staring at screens. People who might need more time might need alternate formats, assistance to help them with reading the materials, ASL and captions for meetings and videos, accessible in-person meetings and breaks. And it's important to ask upfront, give plenty of time to provide these accommodations and communicate what the expectations are for workload and timing, et cetera, and make sure that you budget for providing accommodations to panelists. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll put some more information into the chat, and we would love to hear from our other presenters. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Catherine. Now we're going to bring up Mass Cultural Council. We have Michael Bopp, their Executive Director, and Charles Baldwin, Program Officer and Accessibility Professional Extraordinaire. Charles, Michael.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Bobbitt, Executive Director of Mass Cultural Council. I am a lighter complexioned, bald, black guy with little facial hair. I'm wearing a snug blue dress shirt so I can show off my massive guns that I work really hard on. Also, behind me are 3 contemporary art photos, paintings as part of my large collection of art. Charles?
Hello, folks. This is Charles. I am an older, white, hobbit-shaped fellow with mohawk glasses and a beard, and we're going to jump right in. All right, and on this first slide here, the image behind our branded information is from Access Dance at Jacob's Pillow, where we see a dancer aloft and a dancer who uses a wheelchair.
One of the things we wanted to say to you all in the beginning is that equity is at the center of all the work that Mass Cultural Council is doing, and we have ramped that up when I started there in 2021. We just believe all who practice and participate in creative and cultural expression should see themselves in it. When Charles and I were prepping for this, Charles reminded me that he and his colleagues talk often about leadership buy-in. And so he thought it was interesting to have me talk about this because I had been the person pushing the agency in this direction. And when I say pushing, it hasn't been with resistance, it's been pushing and people cheerleading and getting behind. We also have been really thinking about our role as a state agency, how we can advance the whole sector, how we can influence the whole sector, who we give money to, and then how we give that money, how to make that money really applicant-centric, applicant-centric grant making. We also believe that culture drives equity, that without the culture behind this work being in place, then the equity work will be slowed. So consequently, pace has been a part of the work. The pace is not determined by those who are the most uncomfortable. It's determined by those who we're trying to serve. So we've worked on bringing everyone along, and those that needed more time, we supported them in that effort. We also felt very strongly that the trend was to do DEIA-JB plans, where this one plan was trying to solve all of the oppression issues that we have out there. And I felt very strongly that we needed expertise. We needed to have a suite of plans rather than one combined plan. So we launched a racial equity plan in 2021. We are very soon, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be launching out our Indigenous and Native American cultural equity plan and our deaf and disability equity and access plan. The other parts about our plan was that we wanted to be very persistent about our work. And we also wanted to make sure the plans were not the end goal. They were part of the process, and that throughout this process, we would always level up. Like a video game, you never finish this stuff. You can always level up to the next level. We also wanted to make sure it aligned with our strategic goals, especially our advancement goals. We wanted to make sure the goals were achievable, but also aggressive, so that when we had great wins, we could celebrate them. Charles?
This is Charles, and briefly, the image on this slide is from Abilities Dance Boston. We have two dancers, one crouching on the stage and the other on their back on top of the first dancer. And you're hearing it here first. We're about to launch our Deaf and Disability Access Plan. And as many of you know, and Michael intimated at, it's process. This plan really started based on some reports that we were doing around organizational competency. And then we worked with Open Door Arts and Artreach to really hear from our constituency, as well as the population of folks with disabilities, to really think about their needs. What was important was a with me, not for me directive. So we weren't applying things, but actually responding to. And the big pieces of this have really been receiving all these recommendations and recognizing what we, as Michael said, what would be achievable. We know that sometimes there's a level of anxiety that can occur with our colleagues along the lines of what's expected of me. And we also know that as we go out with the constituency, to educate has been so critically important, because there's a vast array of understanding on what access is, never mind how disability may be defined as a condition, a temporary condition, an identity, a behavior. And my focus when I think about this work is, while it's human-centered, it's really thinking about the disabling environments that we're trying to make barrier-free. And so this plan is really aligned with the strategic plan. It is both the internal work of the council, so that, as mentioned, our grant portal is more accessible. We're bringing in screen readers, people who use screen readers to assess. But it's also to support the organizations and the artists who are receiving funds, to provide them with the knowledge on what may help them become, again, more competent. And for artists, it's providing them with the consultations that will really support their future endeavors. What we're finding from some of the data, of course, is that cost was often the number one barrier. And there's a variety of reasons why people with disabilities may be affected by that. But it was really this comprehensive, many departmental, many disciplined approach to this plan that we anticipate launching in 2025, with an idea of having a number of touch points so that we too are modifying and adapting as we go along in that every 3-year component. And the image here is from a Wheelock Family Theater production of A Wrinkle in Time, where you see the ASL interpreters in front of some of the performers on their stage.
So give you a preview of some of our action steps, and there are many more, and there's much more detail to tease this out, but we gave you the top level bullets. We will be auditing and creating a correction plan for operations. So we'll have some experts coming in to looking at everything that we do operationally to make sure that it is accessible. We really want to exceed ADA, federal and state compliance laws. So we're looking at how to go deeper on that stuff, and we'll have consultants help us with that. And then we're certainly going to provide regular staff and council training and education, so that we are staying aware of the issues and also new things that are popping up and new compliances and new laws.
And the external actions, of which there are many. And again, we haven't separated organizations distinctly. We haven't separated people from one demographic to the next. We're really going into this work with an approach that sees continual improvement, a level of accountability around that improvement, access plans and assessment tools. We're working with our partners to provide those for our grantees, as well as educational and training modules that are available to them to enhance their own learning and understanding of what we mean when we say access. Access can be such a shorthand for disability inclusion, but we also know it is broader than that, and not all people identify as having a disability, but may still benefit from access being supporting their participation. So it really is this, I'm only laughing now because I'm like, oh, there's going to be so much to do in 2025. But it really is this broad, multi-tendril action. And what we're hoping to achieve, of course, is being able to define a rubric of when access is successful. We know it's not just because you can check a list and say, I offer these 10 things, because there's a nuance to what success may be deemed based on the capacity of an organization, based on a sort of a nimble quality to both anticipate and respond to the needs of our population, which really then gets rooted in how are we creating that sense of belonging that everyone's always looking for. So in this image here, access to arts mosaic from Partners for Youth with Disabilities, a bright 3-paneled mosaic showing an exterior garden with a cat on a bench, and there's a young person in a wheelchair touching the tactile mosaic.
And the one other thing I was going to say is that we want the assessment tools, the resource pages, and the learning to be virtual, to be asynchronous, so that as staff changes at your organization, there's still a tool that people can go back to. Probably it'll be somewhat evergreen and updated on an annual basis, but we're very excited about the tools, the assessment, and the learning that this can reach thousands of arts organizations across the state annually.
I always love how you say thousands, Michael.
Hundreds of thousands, Charles.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes.
All right, and that is us. Both Michael and I are available. We are tax dollars at work in Massachusetts and very happy to be a part of this discussion today. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael and Charles. Really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. I'm now going to turn things over to Jeff Garrett, the Grant Program Manager and Accessibility Coordinator with the Michigan Arts and Culture Council. Jeff.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everybody. I am Jeff Garrett. I am a middle-aged Caucasian guy, black shirt, glasses. Hey, so while I queue up the screen here at the Michigan Arts and Culture Council, man, I hope I got the right one, everybody. Okay, good. Here we go. So, anyways, I'm a program manager with the Arts Council as well as the accessibility coordinator. Of course, we've always had accessibility coordinator through the existence of the office, but lately we've been slowly ramping up little initiatives throughout the years. And then until this year, we got to the great big one. And so I guess you could kind of look at some of our accessibility initiatives somewhere along the lines of what's referred to as the curb cut effect, where curb cuts were originally invented to help persons with visual disabilities navigate through streets, and then they would know that hitting the bumps with their feet or with their cane could indicate that they were close to the edge. But turns out it was also really helpful for people who couldn't really do steps that well, people that are pushing carts, people that have a baby stroller. So it really helps out everybody and not just maybe the design that it was just to solve. But so we went through and we worked with the Office of Continuous Improvement, which is a department within the state of Michigan. And we also worked closely with the Attorney General's office. And we took everything down to what do we really have to do legally as a state arts agency. And then from there, we built back up. And so we realized that we probably don't need 9 separate grant programs for an applicant to apply to. I want to apply for operations. I want to apply for capital improvement. I want to apply for new leaders. I want to apply for professional development opportunity. I want to apply for a mini grant. I want to apply for other stuff. And so we cut it down to you have 1 grant application. And then from there, you indicate which areas of funding you have interest in applying for, pursuing. So what we did first is like we do every year, and I'm sure everyone else does it. We do a whole host of in-person workshops. We talk about upcoming changes for FY25. We talk about tips how to apply and also who to contact. We also are in the midst of a series of virtual workshops for that way because Michigan kind of has 2 bodies of land, and so sometimes it's hard to get around, and so we do the virtual one for folks to log in, and we did an AM one, we did a PM one, and then we're going to do an evening one here in a few more weeks. And then of course all along the way we've done these weekly virtual office hours, and that is where applicants can simply just drop in. We take turns hosting this office hours, and then people can drop in and just ask us questions, cold call us basically. But anyone can call us and request a Zoom or a Teams meeting. They can chat with us on the phone and of course email. And so we do our best to stay in contact and with everyone that we can, or at least wants to chat with us. So new in 25, we simplified the application process. We don't have 9 grant programs anymore. A nonprofit arts and culture organization will apply for 1 grant. And then all the other organizations that can apply for grants will apply for the other grant. And that's it. There's no application fee anymore because we don't have in-person panels anymore. So we don't have the expenses associated with in-person panel process, like reimbursing for mileage and parking and those types of things that come along with that. So no fee to apply anymore. And also our funding request amounts have changed. Some have come down and some have leveled out. For example, in our operational support program, it used to be where higher revenue organizations would apply for higher dollar amount awards. And now it's just the same grant award amount all the way across the board. So even if you have a small organization with small revenue or a large organization with large revenue, you can still apply for that maximum amount. And let's see, cash match. We used to be, the majority of our programs, with the exception of one, was always 1-to-1 cash match. You want 100,000 from us to fix the building, you have to have 100,000 in your hand as well to match. So we tried as a staff to be like, we don't even need a match. Can't we just forego the match and just have them just use the money and do what they do? And so we got it from 100% to 25%. So it's no more one-to-one match. If it's basically just you have to come up with 25% of the match. So that helps alleviate some financial barriers for some organizations. And then the last one is the grant evaluation process altogether. We don't require applicants to address review criteria specifically for each program they're applying for in a 4-page format. We don't ask for 3 pages of key bios of personnel anymore. We don't ask for the organization's history anymore. All that stuff that's already been done. The organization's already a legitimate, or should be, or at least when they get our funding, they will be a legitimate nonprofit registered in the state of Michigan to do business. So that means no more peer review process. That means I'm not trying to hustle 200 people to sign up for a day in the AM and in the PM of July 11th to serve on panels that they hopefully hope that they reviewed 20 applications and did their best to score them objectively. And so removing the panel review process is maybe a little bit radical. We'll see how it goes over the next few years here for everybody, for us. But also it removes conflict of interest quite a bit. It also removes bias, whether it be intentional or unintentional or implicit or even unknown. And so it's just, we're going to what we call a compliance-based review. So as long as the organization can prove that they are a nonprofit organization in good standing with the state of Michigan and the federal government, then they are eligible to receive funds. Who are we talking about? We're talking about nonprofits. We're talking about schools, colleges, municipalities, and tribal entities. Unfortunately, who we are not talking about is individuals. We had a POD program for individuals to attend conferences and workshops. Now we just make it so the organization has to do that and send a person instead. That was the Attorney General's decision that we can't fund individuals directly. And then also we don't do for-profit organizations, and we don't do what's called friends of organizations or single support organizations where they exist for the sole purpose of raising funds for another nonprofit. That's a lot. This is what it looks like. If you're a 501, you have to supply all this stuff to be eligible for funding. If you're a school, you do these things in the middle here. And if you're a college, university, city, township, village, or tribal entity, you just have to make sure that you have a good tax ID and a UEI. So this is it. This is our program. We've cut everything all out and narrowed it way down to just either you are going to apply for mission support or you are going to apply for experience support. And the main difference is that mission support applicants are arts and culture 501c3s. So they have that letter A in their NTE code, their National Taxonomy of Exempt Entities. As long as they have an A in there, they have to apply in mission support. Everyone else applies in experience support. And that's how we separate everyone in the state for their grant funding applications. What does it look like? For example, you are a mission support grant applicant. You fill out your profile, you fill out the organization's profile, you upload the 4 documents that I showed earlier. Make sure you have a UEI, make sure you have an EIN, make sure you have a recent 990, make sure you have a CSR, and make sure that you're registered with the state of Michigan to be a nonprofit. Then after that, then you get the application. The system allows you to apply. You apply one time, one application per applicant. And then through that, you go through a series of questions. So after you become eligible to apply, the first question is, do you have interest in operational support? Do you have operational support needs? If you click no, it moves on to the next question. If you click yes, then it opens up a box where you have 500 words or so to describe what you are going to do with operational support funding. And then you move on to the next one. It used to be, it was a 4-page narrative with 12-point font, 1-point-inch margins, and you were literally addressing anywhere from 20 to 30 specific criteria related to operational support. That's all gone. We had an applicant tell us, one of the first ones who completed it, let one of our program managers know that in comparison to years past, the amount of time or effort that it took to do this year's application in comparison to 24 or 23 or 21 or whatever was about 80% less. So I would consider that, I mean, that's only one testimony. We'll see what we get when we get everyone else to apply here, but that seems like we're on the right track with regard to making things more easily accessible and easily to accomplish. So again, the mission support applicant will say yes or no to operational support. They will say yes or no to facility improvement or equipment. They will say yes or no to professional development, transportation, and in some cases, some work with schools, and they can apply for extra funding to do projects they do with schools. This is what happens. So if you indicate that you're mission support and you want operational support, you click yes or no, and then you fill out 500 words. You upload any supporting documentation that you feel could prove that you are operating, and then you enter a request amount. And that's it. Then you move on to the next one, facilities and equipment. Now for the other applicant pool, your municipalities, tribal entities, colleges, schools, universities, they apply for very similar grant programs. The only difference really is just the dollar amount between project support here and operational support. It's a little bit more for the arts and cultural nonprofits. But both of them now, in years past, facility improvement and equipment purchases was only, or other than not only, it was limited to municipal applicants and arts and culture applicants. And then this year it's just open to everyone that applies. So now we're getting in all the other nonprofit organizations that are applying for funding for project support, and all the other colleges and schools and universities. And let's see, focusing on facility improvement and equipment purchases in the past, we would just stress that it was ideally for projects that increase accessibility, increase energy efficiency, or just increase operations or efficiency with the organization. And then now it's just we've made it open to everybody. And in years prior, facility improvements were only for shovel-ready projects. So that means they were already through all the stages with their planning and their architectural renderings, and now they're ready to actually break ground. And then this year, we went ahead and backed it up and now made it so applicants can apply for funding for feasibility studies, all the way through architectural renderings and drawings, and all the way up to the actual project or equipment. When they fill out the application, most of the applicants, with the exception of schools, have 2 more sections to consider. They could consider supplemental questions. These are questions that we're just obtaining data from the field this year to see who is doing programming specifically for veterans, specifically for persons with disabilities, specifically for persons that are 55 or better, and a couple other categories that we have. And so when applicants answer those questions, a no does not disqualify them from funding, but a yes just adds on extra $100 for them for participating. And then the last one is some organizations, some of our nonprofit organizations also exist on a statewide level, meaning that they serve the entire state, not just their municipality or county or region. And so those applicants have the opportunity to apply for additional funding for what we call the NASAA partnership. And that's basically just a services to the field. These organizations that maybe could offer services on a statewide level that we cannot, so they would work with us and become a partner in a sense. And that is what I have for you guys. Hope I made it. All right, good.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mhm.
Really appreciate that. It was a great presentation as well. You're doing some exciting stuff there. And next presentation will be by Dr. Ellen Mule, Director of Programs from Arts Midwest. Ellen.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. One moment. All right. So thanks for having me today, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the Midwest Award for Artists with Disabilities. And on every slide with an image, you're going to see some artwork from folks who won this award last year. So I'll be giving some image descriptions. Here on the first slide, we've got Matthew Baudet's Effective Flattening 2020. This is a pastel on paper piece featuring an image of the Mona Lisa with some markings on top of it. Oops, hold on. There we go. And a little about myself. I'm a smiling white woman with pulled back brown hair and brown eyes, wearing in this image a green turtleneck shirt in front of autumn trees. And today on camera, I'm wearing a blue shirt with a blue collar. I am director of programs. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And a little background, I helped co-develop this program with my past colleague, Carly Newhouse. She was our former program and accessibility manager. And Joshua Feist, he is our grants officer, and we work together to create this program. And currently it is headed up by John Kaiser. He is our grants manager and accessibility co-coordinator. So those are the folks who help put this together. And I'm going to walk through an overview of the award. I'll talk a little bit about our reflections on how we planned it. We'll talk a little bit about what we learned in the cycle, and then I'll talk about what we're looking ahead towards. And as I mentioned, all the images are from our past awardees. So, overview of the award, our succinct description is this award supports accessibility in the arts and celebrates the work of disabled Midwestern visual artists. And from 2023 to 2025, this award will recognize 27 individuals, 9 per year, in the Arts Midwest region. And that covers Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and the Native nations that share that geography. And if you're interested in following along, feel free to use this QR code, or the link is available in the slides as well. And this slide features a green map of the Arts Midwest geography. So, jumping right in with the overview, context here, we recognize that the general funding community in the Midwest has not historically invested in disabled artists, and that increasing support for this group is an important part of increasing accessibility in the arts. This award also advocates for the arts being a viable source of employment, which is often overlooked by funding agencies supporting people with disabilities. And this award is supported by a 3-year bequest grant from the James Edward Sherbarth and Paul Francis Mosley Giving Fund. And on this slide, we've got a picture from Maggie Laycock. The piece is entitled "The Land of the Midnight Sun is a Humming Refrigerator Light," 2023, multimedia. It features a person with their hand over their face leaning against a refrigerator. Also, it's important for us to note the social model of disability. You'll hear us switch back and forth between people first and identity first language. And we use the phrase disabled, or when we use the phrase disabled artists, we intend to align with the social model of disability, understanding that people are disabled by environmental and societal barriers. And this slide features work by Lauren Bonney. It is entitled "BLMG's Bend 2021. It is gouache on paper, and it features imagery of a quilt. Also important for us to note, disability communities are not a singular group. We want artists to be able to self-identify into this award, and we welcome self or medical diagnosis understanding of disability. Also, disability as you experience it may include, but is not limited to, cognitive, learning, and developmental disabilities, emotional or mental health disabilities, and/or physical disabilities. And we acknowledge disability justice and intersectionality, and encourage artists who are part of historically excluded groups, such as women, people of color, immigrants, and people who identify as LGBTQIA+, to apply for this award. And here we have an image of a work by Andrea Sosa Fontaine. It's entitled "Predisposition for Repair 2023, and it features salvaged canvas, agar glycerol starch soles, ending in a homemade shoe. So that's that work. And then diving into eligibility for this award, the awardees need to be located within our region, have a disability or identify as disabled. They need to create 2D or 3D visual art and be defined as mid-career, which we, for the purposes of this award, are saying is creating artwork and building a career for 5 to 15 years. And this slide features a work by Madison Elise Rubenstein titled "Your Survival and Mine Are Intertwined 2021, Oil Paint, Graphite Oil, and Pastel on Clayboard." And this features imagery of sort of some red and warm colored abstracted shapes with white squiggling forms on top. And then just a rundown of some grant making accessibility, which other presentations have really summarized beautifully, but this is what we included in this particular program, was providing written and video directions online, staff support being available via phone, email, Zoom, office hours. We accept both nominations and applications. And we have an online application system, Smart Simple. I saw some back and forth in the chat about which system. Smart Simple is what we're using, but we also offer, if folks would prefer a Microsoft Word form, or if they'd like to provide their answers verbally via Zoom, we could do a video application. We're really open to whatever suggestions or needs might arise. And then also we make available alternative payment plans or have the option to pay to a guardian to help avoid meeting any income limitations or barriers that are set up by some of the ableist systems. So that's sort of an overview of our accessibility actions for the grant making. And this slide is a work by Larissa Daniel. It's entitled Billy Ray Valentine 2022. It features plaster and acrylic forms of 2 parts of a body seated on a bed with pink confetti, and the legs feature leg braces. And that brings us to reflections on the planning process, which I'm sure a lot of people are curious about. I'll start with the timeline here. So this came together pretty quickly. We got the bequest and we leapt into action. So in February of 2023, we had our initial staff ideation on the award and conversations with our state arts agencies. Then in March of 23, we finalized the scope of the project and we put out a call for panelists. And then in April, we had a consultation with Interact, which I'll talk about on our next slide. And we also confirmed our panelists. By May, we opened our applications. That was open for the month of May. And then over June and July, the panelists set to reviewing the 208 applications. And by July, we notified our 9 awardees and dispersed the awards and set out the public announcement. And this slide features a portrait painted by Bonnie Lee. It's entitled Debbie Levy 2016, and it's oil on canvas, featuring a white woman with red hair and 3 white roses. And as I mentioned, we did a paid consultation with Interact Center located here in the Twin Cities. And we want to give a big thank you to Coco Den, Bonnie Thorne, and Simone Needles, who gave lots of invaluable insights in shaping this award. And it was really crucial for us to build our organizational accessibility knowledge and prepare for supporting applicants in collaboration with their feedback. If you're curious about Interact, we do have a QR code here. You can visit their website. And on this slide, we have an excerpt of a zine by artist Sarah Muehlbauer. The zine is entitled Freedom in Possession 2023, and it features a sort of a deer person and the words freedom and possession. Also, we did some staff learning, staff education, and that involved spending an hour each month for 3 months reading a few chapters and discussing Demystifying Disability by Emily Ladau. This is a great resource. It is short. It is conversational in tone. The author has lived experience with disability, and it's a really great price point. I just want to give a personal recommendation here that it's a great book and one that's super accessible. So what did we learn? We just wrapped up our first year cycle, and we're in the middle of selecting cycle 2. So I've got some helpful reflections. First, in terms of scope and outreach, we learned that this is very popular. Applications increased from 208, which we felt was a big number in cycle 1. The applications leapt to 349 in cycle 2. And internally, we had staff feedback that we wonder if it could be helpful to further narrow the eligible art forms due to staff capacity. That's something we wrestle with internally. And then externally, applicant feedback. We had some feedback that folks would be interested in being able to submit performance work, which is outside the realm of that 2D, 3D parameter. And then we also noticed application rates varied greatly across our states. This slide features a chart that lists how many applications we had in each state. And we wonder if there are, in some of our states, some stigma attached to disability, and if and how this may affect our application rates, given how widely they vary. So those are things that we're interested in studying. Also, what did we learn and what tools did we use? We surveyed our applicants and our panelists in cycle 1. and asked for feedback on how to improve for cycle 2. We also conducted an internal retrospective with staff to review feedback from the surveys and also gather reflections from everybody who worked on the program. So some positive feedback was there's clear interest. Consultation with Interact was excellent. Keeping the application super short and simple was great. And the transparency of providing questions and criteria was really helpful. Some of the challenges included the volume of applications because it was so popular. Budget, you can always use more money. And then clarity around the art media and the years of experience. We did do a lot of talking back and forth with applicants about this. And then more panel meeting time was requested by the panelists. And then finally, making the images available on our platform rather than downloads. And that is an issue that we resolved for cycle 2. And on this slide, we've got a work by Matthew Baudet titled Haldol 2022, Oil and Mixed Media Fabric, or Mixed Media on Fabric, featuring imagery of a king in front of purple trees. And last but not least, what we learned about funding was it's really vital to budget for accessibility services, ASL, captioning, extra staff time, anything that could pop up, make sure there's extra cushion in your budget. And then also continuity of funding. This is a 3-year bequest. And so there's really a clear need for this in our region, and we are definitely seeking out more funders to continue this award because of its popularity. And this image here is a piece by Laura Bonney titled Ancestors 2022. It's a digital artwork featuring several geometric patterns. And that's it.
Thank you, Ellen. And thanks to all the presenters. I'm going to shift our session now into 15 minutes of a moderated discussion. So if you have any other questions you'd like to ask our panelists, please go ahead and throw them in chat. I have quite a number of questions already kind of sitting to the side, so please get them in there and we'll answer as many as possible. First question I have for you all is, could you talk a little bit about the evolution of your approach to accessibility? Like what is new or different now versus when you started? How did you go about getting the new approaches embraced by the people who needed to embrace them, like the leadership and the constituents? And if there are any partners that have been invaluable in moving that work forward? I'm going to start with Michael and Charles on this because I think they started to answer this question already in their presentation.
Yeah, one of the things, this is Michael, one of the things I would say is that Charles has done an amazing job building alliances and relationships across the Commonwealth, not only with artists that are deaf and disabled, but also with organizations that support that community and many of the organizations that want to engage with that community. One of the brilliant things that Charles used to manage was this learning network where there were 15 or 20 or so arts organizations doing 5-month intensive trainings. And because the urgency of this and the need for this has grown, we have decided to scale that so that we can have more people, as I mentioned before, hundreds of thousands of people learning on this platform. That was somewhat of a controversial decision because we didn't want to lose that intimacy, but we also knew that we needed, we have a sector that has thousands and thousands of arts organizations in it. If we were only able to engage with 15 or 20 a year, we started questioning the impact of that. So, and that online learning has also scaled and people are finding that more accessible. We thought this was a good time to go to that work. I think because we built so much trust, we were able to engage with partners that really were able to really look at our work for a good half a year or so and come back with some strong recommendations. We didn't take all of the recommendations. Some of them were out of the purview of us as a state arts agency, but most of those recommendations are now in the plan. And that urgency came out of the need to just engage with those people that don't get funding the most. I frankly believe that state arts agencies are here to fund everyone in the sector, and we have to fund the people who need our help the most. Those are our priorities.
This is Charles, and I'll just echo what Michael has sort of talking about, because as we think about how we distribute and who we distribute, we're reaching far more many people than we can fund. And so how do we achieve a solid, sustainable series of programs? It's great to celebrate who we're funding, but again, recognizing there's so much that goes unfunded. So strategically, how do we partner with other state agencies to reach people who may not even be thinking about the state as a resource for financial support? And so this advancements work that we'll be doing over the next couple of years, I think is going to be critical for how we approach both the disabling environments and again, to lift the cultural competencies. And I can't reiterate more, it's really about those strategic partnerships, because it's not me at the podium, but it is the organizations that work directly and serve specifically people with disabilities that are sort of informing how we reach people and how do we how the grants affect them. Ellen mentioned this in the work that they were doing for people who are in anti-poverty programs. Our grants do affect them. So what are the methods that we have to achieve that unrestricted grant that we're hoping to deliver? And it's those partnerships that have proved to be so very effective. Just as an example, the Card to Culture program, which started out specifically with the Department of Transitional Assistance, that people who received SNAP cards or EBT cards were able to get free or discounted access to cultural programs and places. That relationship now has resulted in, oh, I don't have the acronyms in front of me, Michael, but 2 of the programs under the DTA will now not be considering the grant from the Mass Cultural Council as unearned income, which is huge when you have those various barriers that prevent you from accumulating common, wealth based on SSI. Anyway, really can't do it without strategic partnerships.
Great, thank you, Michael Charles. Michael and Charles, not Michael Charles. That's a completely different person. Jeff, I'm going to go to you and talk a little bit about this. I also like to fold in this question that came in through chat from Michelle about, I mean, you guys are doing such radical work getting rid of the grant panels. How did you get to that? Like, how did they evolve into that? As well as, how do you make decisions if you have more organizations that qualify than you have funds available? Like, just a little bit more into that, how you're ensuring that ADA 504 accessibility, things like that.
Sure. So the ensuring ADA accessibility, like it's kind of similar to a response that either Beth or Catherine put out a little while earlier with regard to, we kind of just depend on someone to call and complain about it, which hasn't happened, but we're very upfront with regard to those that are receiving federal funds that this is part of the program. And so when I said we kind of grew up in little steps every year. It used to be we just asked, hey, have you done a self-evaluation? Yes or no? And then the next year, like, hey, have you done a self-evaluation? And do you have an ADA coordinator? And then the next year, hey, do you have this and a coordinator? And do you have that coordinator's name and email address and contact information just so it's in our system? And then next year, hey, oh, you're going to apply funds. You need to fill out the Section 504 self-evaluation from the NEA's website. And so that is a requirement for anyone that applies for mission support. And so that basically, first of all, it just sends that information over the bow there that, hey, make sure you're aware of this stuff. This is important. It's required. And then in the application, it's in there again several times. And then it's also in the assurances that when you apply, you have to submit a document that says that everything I've submitted is true. And that way, if something is not true, it's not our fault, it's their fault. And then it just kind of goes down the line like that. That was to assure that one. The second question was, I already forgot already, but something with regard to, oh, funds available. Yeah. So this stuff, think of this as our pilot year. I mean, because we're just trying this out. Next year, our dates will change. We gave extra time this year, an extra month for the field to know that guidelines are there. I'm not going to say everyone reads the guidelines because you all have feelings about guidelines and whether people actually read them or not. But It's oh, I lost my spot. Okay. It's this, we're going to change the date next year, and then so a few other changes that will go along. It's because it's a learning process, and we anticipate that we'll have not the same amount of applicants, because in the past an organization could apply 5 times, and so now that organization are going to apply once. So statistically, we're going to have less applicants, the number of applicants that are going to apply this year, but we may have more in requests, and so the funding plan is to, when everyone's eligible, we just take what we have allotted to that, to operational support, and then we just divide it, by the number of applicants. And if it gets to that point, then I guess I have to figure something out. But from our looking at past data and numbers that we have, we feel that we're going to be able to cover everybody. But then it'll give us good leverage for future budgets with legislature to help us see that there is need for more funding. And so kind of use it to go from there. And then also, like I talked about the supplemental questions will give us really good data with regard to how many people in the field are doing this, and then also give us data and numbers that we can go to other agencies, state agencies, and ask them for partnerships or some kind of collaboration of some sort to help move that way, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mhm.
Beth mentioned this in the chat already, but I just that way you kind of did this incrementally in small steps, and it sounds like you're committed to that constant small step improvement. I mean, I just think that's brilliant because it breaks it down such a way that you can actually make big changes over time.
Yeah, requiring the 504 self-evaluation was a big one, because most people never heard of it. I mean, realistically, not everyone's like, oh, we have a business, we need to hire an ADA coordinator right away. We didn't have an accessibility person right here on staff. And so when that requirement first came out, I mean, my phone was lit up and email with, do I have to hire an attorney? Do I have to have a special committee? How much is it going to cost? And I was like, no. It's just self-evaluation, do the best you can. And so then I created a cheat sheet to help applicants approach that 39-page downloadable document that you had to upload later on in Smart Simple.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. Ellen, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this evolution, how you kind of got this project, where you think this may be going. I know you mentioned in your presentation request for performance, which is outside of that 2D, 3D. I was also struck by you're already bumping up against capacity issues.
Yep. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's just a really huge need in the field. And we knew that going in. That's why we picked this very narrow slice of 2D, 3D visual art mid-career. We kept chipping away at it, knowing that capacity would be an issue because we're not a huge organization. And then, inevitably, especially from artists, you're going to hear folks who work outside the box and who want to work in really unique, amazing ways. And because we had to create some sort of bumpers on this to keep it within capacity, yeah, you get feedback that we wish it was this, we wish it were that, we wish it were bigger, we wish it were longer, all of those things. So I think in the spirit of that incrementalism that was just mentioned, keeping really good track of feedback, and then being diligent as a staff in our retrospectives each year and asking ourselves tough questions about do we want to stick with what we have for all 3 years? Are we going to modify for cycle 3? We definitely updated and shifted a little bit for some elements of it for cycle 2. And on top of it, it's 3 years. And this comes back to larger discussions of sustainability and how do we keep providing for this area of the field as this unique gift comes to its natural end. It was a finite gift, and so I don't have a neat and clean answer for you. I just want to say out loud that it's really hard. It's really tough to make choices and narrow the scope so that we can do it within the capacity of our staff while reaching and being as accessible as possible to as many artists as possible.
Yeah, I think we all feel that. Capacity seems to be what everyone bumps up against in our field for sure. Beth, Catherine, before I move on to the next question, do you have anything you'd like to add around this evolution of the approach to accessibility, either from your point of view there at the NEA or what you're seeing in the field?
Yeah, I've been really encouraged to see how many states are really starting to or continuing to grow their programs, both for accessibility and compliance and for support for disabled artists. And like Jeff said, the incremental approach. I'd love to see the increments be big. You know, the small things are great, but as much as you can do as possible each year, each time you reassess your grant making and your compliance checks, just think about all the different kinds of things you can do. And I mentioned in the chat that, you know, we're convening the accessibility coordinators regularly. Now we're doing it virtually on a monthly basis. To give people the chance to share with each other and to think about it. And I appreciate seeing how many people that aren't access people who are on the call today, who are getting this information. So hopefully we can all work together on this.
Catherine, do you have anything?
I mean, ditto. It sometimes is frustrating that, and I've been doing this for hopefully longer than it seems like I look, but I have been doing this for a long time, and the barriers are still kind of the same barriers, so it can get frustrating, but it has been exciting to see more and more interest, and everybody's in their own process of evolution and moving it forward. But it starts with that intention and first step. And if you're getting questions, and even if people are freaking out, that's good, because it means people are paying attention, which is what we want them to do. And yeah, I'll put our emails and things, but we are a resource for everyone. And, we usually draw our accessibility coordinators, but really we are open for all the staff at the state arts agencies and regional arts organizations who want to be more active in the accessibility efforts happening within your organization.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. I've been so caught up in this conversation, I just realized we're out of time. So I want to thank all the panelists, Jeff, Michael, Ellen, Charles, Beth, Catherine, for sharing this invaluable information. Let everyone here know that I'll be gathering the presentations from them.